The second Futaro Yamada novel that we'll be looking at in order to get a sense of where Ninja Scroll comes from is Makai Tensho, published in 1967.
The what?
Makai Tensho.
Makai Tensho!
Terrific. Well, what is happening?
Well, we're just breaking down the influences of Ninja Scroll. And last time we talked about the Koga Ninja Scrolls, Futaro Yamada's other novel, and this time we're talking about Makai Tensho.
Oh, you want to talk about that, huh?
Oh yeah, definitely. This is the darkest chapter as well in this entire series on Ninja Scroll, whether you're looking at the supernatural side with all of the resurrections, or the historical reality in which the book is based. Ninja Scroll might dabble with resurrection. Makai Tensho is all about it.
You've had to be more specific than that.
Oh, we're going to get into it. I just wanted to give everybody a heads up after the last chapter with the testicle chin guy and everything. We're going to be talking about severed heads, forces of darkness, guts, blood, viscera, tits, gore, all that kind of stuff.
If you don't mind, do you mind if I go home now? Because I get very scary when there's a lot of scary people in there.
I'm going to edit the majority of the gore and everything and the violence out of this, but I just wanted to preface the chapter just in case we have any sensitive viewers that are watching.
Skulls? Forces of darkness? This isn't right. I was an altar boy, for the love of Pete, at St. Timothy's.
It's not even going to be that bad, honestly. I mean, we haven't even gotten to the good stuff yet. Aren't you intrigued at all?
I'm kind of curious myself now that you mention it.
So should I just jump into the goriest and most salacious parts right away?
I just think you should get some background information before we go into details.
Okay, great. This book is also based in historical fact, this time the Shimabura Rebellion of 1637 to 1638.
What is it?
An influx of Christian missionaries to Japan found receptive minds in a lot of the destitute and desperate peasants, squeezed by overtaxation from their feudal lords to keep their lavish lifestyles going.
Sounds fair.
Missionaries were known to use tricks, like, for example, to get over the language barrier, they would use the word Buddha as interchangeable with God, so that Japanese people they were speaking to would think, oh, like, this is just an offshoot of my own beliefs, rather than an entirely new religion. It's kind of like sneaky like that.
Son of a bitch must pay.
Yeah, right? Nothing says divinity like needing to trick people into following you.
No gimmick. Eternal life.
Eventually the shogun reverses his position, where once he embraced Christianity and its emissaries, he now begins realizing that it's a danger and a destabilizing force to his nation.
Every one of them will meet his death! They will be crushed by the power of the Christian!
They outlaw Christianity and punish the practitioners with death.
Now that's bad.
And people under suspicion are rounded up and carted off to prison.
Really?
Yeah, but eventually the people do rise up, and in 1637 Japan has its largest civil uprising, and 37,000 people were beheaded. Although some people say that they actually cut every severed head in half, making the count seem like it was twice as many.
That's gross.
And that part's all real, actual, factual history. Yamada adds his own supernatural twist to the historical events, making the leader of the Christian rebels, Amakusa Shiro, come back from the dead to get revenge.
It is I, Amakusa Shiro Tokisada.
And along the way, he's bringing back an entire crew of historical characters that are going to function as his like gang of evil people, using black magic and ritual sacrifice and all that kind of stuff.
Anything else that you find strange about these guys?
Well, yeah, I mean, now that you mention it, women are just not going to catch a break in this series.
You filthy pig!
Prepare to die!
I'll say.
I mean, sure, Ninja Scroll and the character of Kagero kind of lend themselves thematically to rape, given her poison abilities and how people have to sleep with her or kiss her, and so, you know, that creates an against your will kind of situation because she's killing those people. But Makai Tensho is going to take it to an entirely new level. We're talking about resurrection from hell, and the way that specifically seems to play out in a practical sense is bringing people back through the flesh, the bodies of young women who are sacrificed. And that's why it gets really into this body horror with the viscera and the guts and everything. It's very Clive Barker and Hellraiser.
Why don't we call it a little bit of hanky-panky?
Because that would be wildly inappropriate. But anyway, there are 4 main adaptations, and we're going to look at all 4 of them today.
Are you sure?
No, I'm pretty sure. I think there's about 4 productions that are worth looking at least today. I'm not an expert, but this is what I found. There are 7 main antagonists throughout the various incarnations of Makai Tensho on the screen. Different ones are going to have different variations, but this clip from Reborn from Hell actually does a great job of just laying them all out, and far better than my clumsy words could.
What to write fortune cookies, pal.
Thanks. Anyway, the clip's about a minute long. I tried to cut it down, so why don't we take a look at that? I'll see you on the other side.
See you on the other side, Ray.
A young general who fought bravely against the Tokugawa shogunate led an army of 38,000 Christians, but died with tears of sorrow. Amakusa Shido Tokisata. She was a nurse of the 3rd General Iemitsu Tokugawa. As her aging body disgraced her, she sought to be resurrected young and nubile. Queen Kasuga no Tsobone. In the famed battle at Ueno, 30 men died by his sword alone. He died tragically before his time. Araki Mataimo. A talented swordmaster, he swore to avenge his father's murder, but suffered an untimely death from disease. Futaro Tamiya. Known as God of the Sword, he fought triumphantly in over 60 battles. He died before he could satisfy his honor in a final fight. Musashi Miyamoto. In order to learn to battle with the spear, he denied himself all pleasures of the flesh for many years. But his lust for women was overpowering and ultimately led to his demise. Inshun Hazoin. He was known as the Swordmaster of Tokugawa, and his skills allowed him to rise to associate governor. He died before he could reconcile with his son Jubei. Tajima no Kami Yakyu. So Amakusa Shiro's running around bringing back all these demons from hell. So who do you think's going to be the guy that stops him?
Surprise me.
Yakyu Jubei.
I like his style.
Yeah, me too. And he's always got this, like, gravitas, you know?
We could all use a little dose of that.
Yeah, probably. Jubei's father is actually in most of these productions as well, and he's either just died or he's going to pass away in the production. And it's his competitive relationship with his son that kind of motivates him in a lot of cases. So for Jubei this time, it's pretty safe to say that
this time, it's personal.
Of the 4 main adaptations, the first one is the most important. In 1981, we see Sonny Chiba team up with his Shogun Samurai director to create Samurai Reincarnation. Hey, we finally made it. Yay!
Just in the nick of time.
It's pretty easy to see the visual comparisons when you're watching the movie, the beheadings of the villains and the resurrection of the villain, the inclusion of Jubei, the climax in the fiery ship, a lot of exotic locations. It's all the stuff that we've been talking about through this entire series. But there's more.
So what's on your twisted mind this time, old man?
Well, we previously mentioned the Hattori Hanzo scene from Kill Bill and the parallel there, but actually the entire scene where he comes to get the sword made also feels very similar to Kill Bill. I'm just such a sucker for a good sword forging scene. Actually bad sword forging scenes, as it's actually unsurprising to learn.
It does seem to be the consensus, doesn't it?
Well, in this case, at least the Swordmaster is legit. Muramasa was a real guy, a historical reality, the guy that made the demon blades, that cut gods that were cursed and all the rest of it. He really existed. He really knew the real Tokugawa Ieyasu who used his blades. And they actually really do have a silly superstition about them being cursed and everything, but it's kind of stupid. I mean, the history of any weapon is going to be the history of blood and death and bad things happening to people. So, do the Muramasa blades carry a history of tragedy and people dying? Yeah, but that's going to be the history of every weapon, right?
Oh, well, that was stupid.
Yeah, well now, they're priceless, often counterfeited. Muramasa himself is a pop culture legend, seen in movies, video games like Final Fantasy and Demon Blade, and even known to Marvel Comics fans as the Demon Blade that Wolverine is seen carrying. He's encountered 2. One of them he carried while he was actually in hell.
We can be sure of one thing. Whatever it was very powerful.
Now, the same year that Ninja Scroll hit video stores, another production was released. Reborn from Hell Samurai Armageddon. And it's got way more blood and way more gore and way more nudity.
Now everybody's happy.
The production split into 2 movies. Reborn from Hell does in 2 movies what Samurai Reincarnation did in 1, but it's no less fun. No idea really why they made the decision to do that. Well, there's certainly enough material and characters and plot points to keep things moving along and fill up the runtime. Is that what you mean?
You wanted to know.
Yeah.
Now you know.
Okay. Helpful. Well, now, while it's not Sonny Chiba, it's a pretty good Jubei. You just have to accept that it's a lesser Jubei than a Sonny Chiba Jubei. And I can't confirm it, but I feel like the level of production values that these 2 movies have kind of lead me to believe that it's probably more of a TV production than a theatrical release. So think something along the lines of a Xena Warrior Princess or Hercules, the Pre-Racist Adventures.
Maybe.
In other productions, you generally see a Matsushiro set up as the lead villain, but in Reborn from Hell, with 2 movies, you've really got the runtime to explore all of these different villains in the crew.
What are you talking about?
Well, it's just that in other productions, the fight scenes can seem a little rushed, and that lends to the general feeling when you're watching the movie that these are sort of underlings, right? Rather than in Reborn from Hell, you're giving each one of these characters motivations and story arcs, and you spend more time with them. So when Jubei finally gets to fight them, each one, it feels like he's up against this cadre of masters rather than underlings. So more so than other productions, you really get more of an 8 Devils of Kimon kind of vibe like Ninja Scroll. And again, we get to see the moment that young Jubei loses his eye in a flashback, this time from his father's wooden bokken.
Unguarded.
Come on, run!
He cut your flesh. You must cut his bone.
Really, the entire story for Jubei revolves around why he lost his eye, why he was exiled. And if I'm being honest, even though it's not Sonny Chiba's Jubei, and even if the production is a little thin in a few places, it's still really given me all the fun that I wanted of Jubei's sword fights. Even though the production definitely has its rough spots.
Jubei, you will never leave Kishu.
Or this hilarious scene where a bunch of ninjas jump out of the water all anime style onto this boat, but because it's live action and limited production and no CG, they actually are dry jumping off the boat into the water, and then they reverse the film. Okay, let's move on to the next movie. There was also an animated movie that many Ninja Scroll fans will probably be familiar with, and maybe a little salty too. It was titled Demonic Resurrection: Portrait of Hell, and it came out in 97-98. It's comprising 2 OVA episodes that has no ending at all, but they were clearly hoping to continue that as a series. When that didn't materialize, they changed the name to Ninja Resurrection, changed the font on the box, hoping that maybe this visual change would probably be marketed to US audiences as a sequel to Ninja Scroll.
That's the general idea.
Yeah, well, this one's a little controversial. So imagine it's like 1998, or maybe 99 or 2000 even. You're in a comic shop, you're looking around, you see a poster on the wall for this thing, and it sort of looks like Ninja Scroll, and you go up to the lady and you say, like, is this the Ninja Scroll sequel? And she's like, kind of. It's kind of the Ninja Scroll sequel. I'm like, well, is Jubei in it? And she's like, well, sort of. And to be fair, like, if you didn't know any better, there are so many signifiers in this that are like, oh, this is like Ninja Scroll. There's like this Jubei guy, the sword guy, the visual dynamic. Even if you watch it, there's, you know, some rapey stuff in there, and ultra violence and supernatural villains and everything that he's got to go up against. So you could kind of see why that might be the case. Even the cover isn't any help. It's like the front's got a bunch of characters on it that look like they could possibly be Ninja Scroll villains, and the back's description doesn't really help out. It doesn't sort of confirm or deny that it's a sequel to Ninja Scroll, so you really don't know. It's got an expensive price tag because it's an import, but you figure what the hell, you love Ninja Scroll, you cough up the dough, you take it home, you put it in, and you start watching the first episode. Episode? Yeah, it's an episode. It's called Jubei's Revenge. So you're like, well, you know, Jubei's Revenge, it's Jubei, so that's got to be good. So it starts. And there's a bunch of Christians and massacres and churches and blue flaming crosses and worship this and God that. But where's Jubei? We're watching this thing for 17 minutes and there's no Jubei. At 17 minutes, a guy shows up in the shadows wearing this big hat, and you think, oh, maybe that's Jubei. But you won't get a confirmation of that for another 2 minutes. So you're 20 minutes in almost, and all of a sudden he drops in, and it is Jubei. And he's got a team of superheroes with him, including Wolverine. Maybe he was looking for the Muramasa blade. Well, I think he can introduce himself.
My name is Jubei Yagyu.
And it isn't all bad. I mean, there are brief flashes of pretty much exactly what you were looking for. And to be totally honest, way back in '99, I wasn't really thinking about the pervasiveness of rape culture or anything. I was just excited there was another booby-licking scene.
Let's see the next picture.
Yeah, but I mean, it's still rape.
Well, you're right. They are disgusting.
There's also a scene where a severed finger crawls up into a woman.
You are sick. You know that? S-I-Q-U-E, sick.
I'm sick? Well, you turned that on me fast. I mean, I told you at the beginning, I made a preface saying this is going to be the darkest chapter. This is going to be about some effed up stuff, right? So, like, what's the problem? What, have you been day drinking again?
That's for you to know and me to find out. I mean, vice versa.
Yeah, well, just like Tasai, this big rapist has also got one of those throwing swords. Ninja Resurrection is not the worst anime that I've ever seen. I mean, it's far from the best. It's not like the highest quality or anything, but if you were looking for an adaptation straight up of Makai Tensho, it's really not doing that bad of a job. It's a pretty decent first chapter opening adaptation. It's just too bad that the series didn't have more time to develop and be judged on its own merits. Many Ninja Scroll fans feel rightly burned by the desperate marketing.
Lighten up, my man. I've seen people burn for $10.
So we know Ninja Scroll fans were let down, but let's now talk about Ninja Resurrection knowing that it has no connection to Ninja Scroll at all.
But what about the story?
Well, the first episode really isn't about Jubei at all. It's more about building up Amaksashiro, giving us the backstory, his motivation, and honestly making him a somewhat sympathetic character. As a first chapter in an adaptation of Makai Tensho, I think it's pretty reasonable.
Reasonable? Oh, what else could I expect?
Well, the second episode opens with a flashback of Jubei losing his eye to his father, this time from a dart being thrown in his eye. And again, this is used as motivation to explain where he was for those wandering 12 years.
I wondered that myself.
No. Wandered, not wondered, with an A. It doesn't matter. Most of the second part is actually about building up Amaksashiro's crew and filling in like who all these people are, so that by the time you get to the end of that episode, like there's going to be big fights ahead if, you know, we had got a continuation. And we also get to see an absolutely disgusting demon birthing like through a woman like thing that you just... Anyway, I can't show it to you here, but what I could probably do is I'm just going to cut out the middle where you see everything, and I'm just going to give you the beginning and the aftermath, okay? And you can kind of fill in that, like, I cut a lot of gross things out in the middle. So check this out.
Come to us, Satan! Come to us, Tokusada Shiro! Amakusa! Lord Shido!
I don't know what it is, but suddenly I've lost my appetite.
And the tooth floss powers are actually in hyper mode here too. But sadly, by episode 2, we're already seeing like reusing of animation from the first episode, which is just really not a good look.
I'll say.
Now let's see how the last of our 4 adaptations turned out.
It's a strange and fantastic affair, but it's not entirely frightening if we try to understand.
The other live adaptation came out in 2003, and it wasn't called Samurai Reincarnation, and it wasn't called Ninja Resurrection. This time it was called Samurai Resurrection. The production's actually pretty decent, and they beat the Avengers Infinity War CGI dustings by decades.
It's impossible.
Again, we're not getting Sonny Chiba in this production, but it's a pretty decent Jubei. Interestingly, this production actually keeps Jubei with both eyes until the end. Hope that's not a spoiler or anything, but it came out in 2003, so I think we're past that part. While other productions will use Jubei's eye loss, as we've talked about, as a lesson, or something that informs his character, here they kind of hold off and use it in the final fight scene as like this dramatic thing, like, and he lost an eye. But, I don't know, it just kind of seems a little hollow, and you've kind of robbed us of that iconic eye patch Jubei for the entire thing.
But why would you do that?
I don't know. But this version is also really rife with nudity and gore and all the stuff I've been talking about that I can't show you, and they have some really gross demonic resurrection stuff with people splitting open and, you know, all that kind of stuff too, which is really cool, and I can't show it to you, and that's a real bummer. But if we go back to Reborn from Hell, there's this really great section where it's explained in dialogue, kind of detailed, exactly what happens. It's pretty neat.
Inside your body, a dead man will be buried there. That dead man will feed on your entrails, and he will thrive and grow within your body. And when his bones have consumed everything inside you, they will burst out into this world, and your sad little life will disappear completely.
Don't like this at all. This film must be destroyed.
While the Koga Ninja Scrolls might be the better known influence, probably because of the similarities in the name, Makai Tensho is really no less important.
Good. I'm glad we don't have to convince you.
I mean, if you combine Jubei and Kagero, and a villain that gets resurrected and his head severed, supernatural fighters, political plot of intrigue to overthrow the government, it's easy to see how these 2 books formed the backbone for Ninja Scroll, and its adaptations to film informed its style. But there's more.
But one thing, we gotta get going.
With the historic, literary, and cinematic influences covered, next we're going to be taking a look at the career of the man who directed and wrote Ninja Scroll, the director Yoshiaki Kawajiri.